In America, everyone counts, and the 2020 census is how that great promise is kept. Respond today online, by phone, or by mail, and help inform hundreds of billions in funding for education, health programs, and more. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov. The 4 former police officers who killed George Floyd were in court today. Derek Chauvin, Alexander Kueng, Thomas Lane and Tou Thao, who are charged in connection with the death of George Floyd. They were in court for a motion hearing in Minneapolis. Hennepin County District Judge Peter Cahill presided over a motion hearing that lasted nearly 3.5 hours as the attorneys argued over a number of key issues in the case, including whether the trial should be moved out of the county, whether the defendants should be tried in one trial or separately, and how jurors will be selected. Now, he has not yet ruled on any of those motions. The family and the attorneys held a news conference after today's hearing.
We demand justice for George Floyd Jr. You know, we just sat through a very emotional hearing where people tried to kill George Floyd a second time. Listen. They made all kind of foolish allegations, talking about he died from a drug overdose. No. Exactly. They're trying to claim the knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds had nothing to do with his death. They are trying to say that the knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds was reasonable. They are trying to claim some asinine theory about an overdose. I want to be clear about this. The only overdose that killed George Floyd was an overdose of excessive force and racism by the Minneapolis Police Department.
Also today, the judge has disqualified the DA and 3 of his attorneys from being involved in the case. This is from the Star Tribune website. What happened today was the judge decided to disqualify District Attorney Mike Freeman and 3 of his staffers, calling their work sloppy because they sent prosecutors to question the medical examiner, as he said, making them witnesses in the case. Quote, those 4 are to be kept out of this case, period. I think it was sloppy not to have someone present at a meeting with a primary witness in this case. Let's go to our panel today. Derek Holly, President, Reaching America, and political analyst. Amisha Cross, political analyst, Democratic strategist. Joseph Williams, Senior Editor, U.S. News and World Report. Joseph, I want to start with you. When you look at what took place today, you heard Ben Crump there. The lawyers for the 4 cops suggested that George Floyd swallowed drugs, fentanyl, as he was being arrested, and they say that's what caused his death, as opposed to the homicide ruling that came from the medical examiner.
Right. Well, this is nothing new. I mean, time and again, we've seen prosecutors or rather defense attorneys try the victim in this case. It's a strategy that I almost expected from day one, because it wasn't the fact that a police officer had brutalized this man and put him face down. It was the fact that something else killed him other than brutality. I mean, we saw it in Eric Garner. We saw it in Trayvon Martin. He was a teenager who smoked drugs, and that was the cause of his death. But the facts belie exactly what that defense is. The fact of the matter is that George Floyd was alive when he went face down when cops put him face down on the pavement. The fact is, even if you're assuming that he had ingested some kind of drugs, that does not mean he deserved to die, and it does not mean he had to die. Simple and plain, the officers had no disregard for his life when they put him down in that position, and none of the 3 other officers stopped him. And it was clear that this was the reason why he died. But again, this is an age-old tactic. It's also designed not only to appeal to a judge, but appeal to potential jurors, because they will have the seed planted in their mind. Even if they say they can be fair and impartial, they will have just this modicum of doubt that could be enough to get them to either hang as a jury or acquit these officers. It's something that's not new at all, and quite honestly should have been expected from day one.
Sure. And again, what you have here, Amisha, you have the lawyers for the cops saying that George Floyd was a danger to the community, talking about his past crimes, history of drug use, calling him an ex-con as well. And again, those attorneys said he likely died from fentanyl, not a knee on his neck, as if the knee on his neck for almost 10 minutes served no purpose whatsoever.
You're right, Roland. This is a disgusting justification that, as was previously stated, isn't necessarily surprising, because it has happened in case after case when we're talking about Black men and women dying at the hands of police officers. But the frustrating part here is that police officers aren't trained in many things aside from, how to handle crimes, but they are trained in how to mitigate overdoses. So if the idea was, if we're following along the line of this lie that they're throwing out, that they suspected that he was going to have an overdose, even though he was walking around free and clear and not bothering anybody and didn't look sick at all, you would not have held your knee on his neck. Because if that was the case, then you would have still exacerbated and caused it. So I'm a little bit confused in this case, particularly why that's the piece that they've decided to use, but also considering that the man had been out and he had been about for hours without any case of sickness at all. This is a very interesting, path to go down. But I think that to your point a moment ago about the revelation of past crimes or past things he had been accused of, the interesting part about that is anytime a white man in America gets arrested for any reason, we don't go down the litany of his past crimes. We just don't. If a white man is actually, in a case of police brutality, because it happens to white people too, just not at the rate that it does African Americans, we don't go down the litany of what may or may not have been in that person's system or when they may have incurred the cops before. Because quite frankly, what we do know is that in this case, he encountered the police based on something that day, which to me and to anyone, any thinking individual knows that, what he did 2 years, 4 years, 10, 15 years prior to that has no bearing whatsoever on his encounter with the police that particular day. And I think that juries need to start paying very close attention to the fact that, one, these types of instances only happen when the person lying in the ground is African American. But on top of that, throughout history, we've seen victims of violent crimes, specifically those that are that have died at the hands of the police, be treated as the criminals themselves. And it's high time that we stop that.
Derek, look, the reality is this here. There are no perfect individuals. And the reality is, if somebody believes that that George Floyd was taking drugs, that still doesn't mean you should have someone press on your neck for almost 10 minutes. What this is all about is sowing seeds of doubt. And look, what these cops are looking for, they're looking for one person on a jury to simply say, I don't believe the prosecution. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think we all saw the video. But I also agree with you guys that we shouldn't be surprised by this, because the defense, they have to mount something in order to just even walk into the courtroom and to paint this picture and use his character against him is something that they always do. But the fact that he was on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I think that's going to be very, very difficult to argue in the court. The second thing is, I thought months ago that the autopsy report had already come out and determined that it was the result of him being on his neck that caused his death and not any type of drugs in his system.
Right.
And I also recall an interview that even Mayor Giuliani at the time was calling for these officers to be arrested, because even he thought that this was what these guys did was a cause of death, and that it was several times where during while he was on his neck that you heard people say, "Get off his neck, get off his neck," and that was actually premeditated, because you had several times that you thought about what you were doing, and never at any point did this guy take his knee off of this man's neck. And so I just find they're going to have a difficult time in trying to find jurors who haven't heard about this. But I don't think they're going to have a difficult time, Roland, in finding that one juror who will believe the prosecutors, because after this happened, I had some people call me, some white people, okay, and they were asking, Derek, where's the body cam? Where's the body cam? Where's the body cam? And so they were already raising questions and doubt then. So I don't think it's going to be that difficult to find one juror who would maybe look at what the prosecutor is saying.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. As our community comes together to support the fight against racial injustice, I want to take a second to talk about one thing we can do to ensure our voices are heard. Not tomorrow, but now. Have your voices heard in terms of what kind of future we want by taking the 2020 census today at 2020census.gov? Now, folks, let me help you out. The census is a count of everyone living in the country. It happens once every 10 years. It is mandated by the U.S. Constitution. The thing that's important is that the census informs funding, billions of dollars, how they are spent in our communities every single year. I grew up in Clinton Park in Houston, Texas, and we wanted new parks and roads and a senior citizen center. Well, the census helps inform all of that and where funding goes. It also determines how many seats your state will get in the U.S. House of Representatives. Young black men and young children of color are historically undercounted, which means a potential loss of funding for services that helps our community. Folks, we have the power to change that. We have the power to help determine where hundreds of billions in federal funding go each year for the next 10 years. Funding that can impact our community, our neighborhoods, and our families and friends. Folks, responses are 100% confidential and can't be shared with your landlord, law enforcement, or any government agency. So please, take the 2020 census today. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov.